This is really interesting because what happened earlier today happened within a school environment. And so one idea I really want to stress is how the intersectionality of our social identities, and we all are composed of multiple social identities, race, gender, religion, socioeconomic status, how they all come together impacts how others view us and our experiences in the world. So with the incident that occurred in Texas, it's really important for us to recognize that Ahmed was not only a Muslim youth, but he was a black Sudanese Muslim youth. And to recognize how there are certain stereotypes associated with first being Muslim, but also by having, a skin color black. And so individuals on the outside may perceive him differently, A, for being Muslim, but then will perceive him with certain stereotypes for also being a black Sudanese youth. And how being both black and Muslim impacted his experience within the school. So while some students may have been applauded for creating something, Ahmed was arrested. And so we have to ask ourselves that individuals that have certain social identities that we would say are not privileged, whether they're darker skinned, whether they're Muslim, female, whether individuals that have certain social identities that are associated with disadvantages, both societal and how other people perceive us, we have to ask ourselves that are those individuals first seen by those social identities and then second seen as individuals, and so to really be cognizant of that. And so one thing that we constantly reinforce, especially within the school environment, is how one protective factor is positive reinforcement. Students spend 6 hours a day in school, and teachers play such a critical role in developing a child's sense of self and confidence. So while parents play a big role in developing a child's confidence and self-esteem, they spend 6 hours a day in a school, and teachers can either reinforce that or they can negatively reinforce that. So in Ahmed's situation and in other situations of students who may be black, African American, who may be Muslim, we have to ask ourselves, what are the long-term impact of a student who is first seen for who's first seen for the color of his skin or his religion, and then seen as a human being by their educators? How does that perception, 6 hours a day, impact their long-term trajectories? Also we have to ask ourselves, are our teachers building up our young people, especially Muslims? And we have to ask ourselves, are the schools set up for success? What do I mean by that? So we look at the Muslim population, and it's a very heterogeneous group. We have Latino Muslims, we have African American Muslims, we have convert Muslim youth that are Caucasian, African American, Latino, from a whole set of races and ethnicities. We have South Asians, we have immigrant Muslim youth, we have second generation immigrant Muslim youth. It's a very heterogeneous, diverse population. And so we have to ask ourselves that individuals that Muslim youth that are going in schools that are underserved, underprivileged, urban environments, in low-income communities, oftentimes predominantly, African American and Latino populations, oftentimes have a lack of funding, lack of adequate resources, and this creates a lack of organization within the school, and that creates a lack of stability and safety within the school. And research continues to show that poorly organized and operated schools, children are less likely to value their education, don't do as well in academics, are more likely to disengage from school, and then start beginning to become involved in negative peer groups that promote delinquent behaviors, that promote risky behaviors. And so to really be mindful that within our Muslim community, we have a very diverse population, and some of our community members are from lower income households. And so how can we as a community provide protective factors, provide a buffer, provide additional, resources, help within the school? What can we do in order to create a better learning environment for Muslim youth and also non-Muslim youth as well? And one thing I do want to stress is within our paper, Dr. Ahmed or Dr. Samira really focuses on the strength-based approach versus the deficit model. And so within that strength-based approach, we really want to focus on what are the strengths of a child and how can we cultivate those strengths to be able to build areas that they may be lacking in. And so I think that's really important for us to do, inshallah. And within the paper, we have a whole host of methods that you can implement within multiple environments, after-school programs as parents, as masjid organizers, as youth mentors, as teachers, and how you can implement strength-based models of working with youth. So now we're going to transition, inshallah, to the community. So again, we talk about how all these different factors impact an individual's experience in the world. So maybe the house life might be a little bit challenging. Parents are going through a divorce, and there's a lot of stress on that marital relationship, which then leads to stress on the child's experience within the home. But then the community can step up and provide that additional support. Then the schools can step up and provide that additional support. If teachers know that something's going on at home, that child may need some extra emotional attention. And so really taking this holistic, multi-tier, multi-level approach where we're no longer looking at each individual family as a unit, but as a member of an entire community. Dr. Samir always says it takes a village, it takes a community to build up a child, to cultivate a child in a healthy manner, and that's very true. And so understanding how important community plays within the development of young people. And so when we talk about communities, I'm going to focus more on faith-based communities, so like a masajid, but oftentimes this idea of faith-based communities is expanding. And so it could be a local masjid, it could be a Muslim youth or student group, it could be a local Muslim organization like the Family and Youth Institute, like Muslim Wellness. It could, and oftentimes we have increasing number of what we call third spaces, and these are both virtual and physical locations where young people are congregating to socialize, foster creative interactions, to grow spiritually, to provide themselves with things that they aren't able to find in other spaces. And oftentimes the creation of these third spaces is a reaction to the lack of relevancy they're finding within the masajids. Oftentimes you talk about the lack of inclusivity, the judgments. A lot of youth, African American, Latino youth, talk about the racism that they experience within predominantly immigrant congregational communities. The lack of diversity, how programming might be more geared towards one or two ethnic groups, how programming may not take into account the lack of wealth, an individual's low socioeconomic status, where it may be more geared to a middle class audience, upper middle class audience. How masajids may don't provide resources or opportunities for women to participate in leadership roles within masjids, boards, etc. And so, we have organizations, created to address racism. You have Muslim ARC, address mental health related issues like Muslim Wellness, the Family and Youth Institute, the Institute for Muslim Mental Health, to address convert care issues. But in addition to the creation of these third spaces, we also see how individuals are just leaving the masjid altogether. They're leaving engaging with Muslim organizations. They're choosing to remove themselves altogether from any Islamic or religious context associated with Islam or Muslims. And this phenomenon can be due to many factors. I'm sure that people in the audience can come up with a list of 10 just from their own personal experiences. But it's important that as we move forward and start forging these third spaces, as we start recreating our masajids, as we start redefining the roles of our community, to realize that 80% of Muslim youth are not, according to a survey, this is a long ago, but according to an ISTA survey years ago, are not even associated with the masajid community. So understanding that our programming has to be more encompassing to pull in an audience that is not even currently involved. And so to keep that in mind, what are the long-term goals of Islam in America? What are the long-term goals in terms of being able to bring people back into the masjid community, into our communities in any capacity? How can we create things that are relevant to them? And so one last point I want to talk about when we talk about congregational cultures, I'm going to wrap it up, I promise. I know people have questions, is that congregational cultures have a big impact on people. You know how you have an individual identity. When you're alone in a small group setting, you act one way. Maybe you're more introspective. But now when you're with a group of friends, your personality changes. You might be more boisterous, loud. You're telling jokes you wouldn't normally say in a group of 3 or 4 people. And so oftentimes we give up that self-autonomy in order to gain acceptance into that group, in order to fit in. The same thing happens within congregational cultures. they set these normative behaviors and standards, and people will accept those normative behaviors and standards in order to gain acceptance or integration within that community. So to recognize the power of congregational cultures, studies found that congregational cultures played a bigger role in creating behavioral expectations than it did in terms of religious denominations. So what does that tell us? That tells us that the behaviors, the social norms, the inclusivity, the judgmentalness, the looking down on people, the stigmatization, if that is the culture a congregation wants to embody, that the individuals within that congregation will accept that in order to gain integration within that. And so to be very mindful of how we're creating inclusive communities and how we may be stigmatizing or pushing individuals out because they may not meet the social standards of that community.